Samuel Clemens went west because he had lost his position as a riverboat pilot, and, more pressingly, he wanted to avoid conscription into the Civil War, blue or gray. His older brother had secured a political appointment in Nevada, so the two of them headed out for the territory by boat and then stagecoach. The West was then a place where a man could make his fame or fortune, or bust himself trying to do either. The great gold rush of 1849 was followed by the discovery of enormous silver deposits, what came to be known as the Comstock lode. Clemens, seeing the need for housing, tried to make a living as a timber merchant and burned down the side of a mountain. He tried mining, but it was too much work. If there was anything Sam Clemens didn't like, besides getting shot at, it was manual labor. So when he was offered a position as a reporter on a newspaper, he jumped at the chance. The pay wasn't great, but it was better than nothing. He started out in Carson City, then moved to Virginia City, which was a real boomtown. There was lots of activity, much of it on the nefarious side of things, so there was a great deal to write about. And if there was a shortage of noteworthy material, Clemens, writing under the name of Mark Twain, would make it up. Perhaps some exciting details, maybe the entire story. The main point was to entertain, agitate, stir things up. Veracity was of less consequence. He made up one gruesome story about the massacre of an entire family, which included graphic depictions of scalping, bludgeoning, stabbing, and dismemberment. When it was exposed as a hoax, entirely fictitious, writers on the other paper called him out on it, and he was forced to apologize in print. "I take it back," he wrote, probably his shortest piece ever, and he signed that Mark Twain. Mark Twain was an extension of Sam Clemens, an embellishment, a character hopefully larger than life, a stretcher, as he might have said. The way to fame in the West was to make a name for yourself, become a legend like Wild Bill Hickok, Jesse James, Billy the Kid, the Earps, Buffalo Bill Cody, Kit Carson, Jim Bridger. Even a mediocre soldier could become famous as Yellowhair, George Armstrong Custer. Mark Twain was trying to become another character of the West. In print, he attacked politicians and lawmen. The politicians were easy targets. The lawmen were not the kind of men you wanted to offend. Twain had already learned that the West was a harsh and unforgiving place, hardly the romantic notions of an author he'd read as a child, James Fenimore Cooper, in his leather-stocking tales. Eventually, Twain would write a very funny critique, Fenimore Cooper's literary offenses, but Cooper was a writer, and he was deceased. If you made fun of a marshal, he might come after you. They called it wearing out your welcome. Twain went to San Francisco. Back east, Artemus Ward was putting together a book of comedic sketches, and he wrote to Twain, asked him to send a piece. They'd met when Ward was on a speaking tour in the West. Twain hemmed and hawed, and finally turned out a story he'd heard in Angel's Camp, a mining boomtown, about a jumping frog contest. That story, reprinted in many publications, boosted him to national prominence. A newspaper offered to pay all expenses if the noted author would go to Hawaii and send back dispatches. Twain loved the Sandwich Islands, as they were then known, the beaches, the volcanoes, the thick vegetation, the natives, and he scored an additional bonus when he got a scoop on a maritime disaster survived by a few men in a rowboat, adrift for nearly 50 days. When he returned to San Francisco, he had the idea to turn his reports on Hawaii into a lecture. He'd learned some tricks from Ward in comic delivery, such as a certain well-positioned pause can earn more laughs than a joke. Twain had a good sense of humor, sparkling wit, as well as his own self-invented character. The lecture series was largely a great success. He went back east and used the Hawaiian experience as the model for his career. Looking back, he pieced together a book on his time in the West, Roughing It. He became a travel and adventure writer. He went to Europe and wrote The Innocents Abroad, his first major success, elevating him once again into national renown. He looked further back and wrote Life on the Mississippi, one of my favorites. Travel and adventure were, I think, the keys to his best work, which is why I like Huck Finn, most of it, and don't care much for Tom Sawyer or the other later works. Twain was a comic genius, and maybe the funniest thing about his life is that he became a writer, became Mark Twain, because when it came right down to it, telling stories beat the living thunder out of working for a living. Simple as that.